City University Television presents the American Theater Wing Seminars. Working in the theater. This seminar, Design.
A warm welcome to the American Theater Wing's Working in the Theater Seminars, now in their 25th year, coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. These seminars offer a rare opportunity to explore with the panelists the realities of working in the theater. This afternoon at the Design Seminar, we are pleased to announce the winners of the American Theater Wing's Design Award. We will learn something about how they became professionals, their work ethic, and the reasons for being in the theater. We hope that you will enjoy and learn from today's experience. I'm Isabel Stevenson, Chairwoman of the Board of the American Theater Wing, and now I would like to introduce to you our moderators for the seminar, Professor Tish Dates and previous Design Award winner, lighting designer Beverly Emmons. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Isabel. I'm Tish Dates, and I'd like to introduce everyone. On my right is Jules Fisher, who in addition to being a lighting designer is a producer. He's designed over 150 Broadway shows and won 7 Tony Awards for such shows as Grand Hotel, The Will Rogers Follies, Jelly's Last Jam, and Bring Into Noise, Bring Into Funk. He's also won innumerable American Theater Wing lighting design awards and has just received another one as co-designer of Ragtime. And in his spare time, he designs for rock groups such as Kiss, the Rolling Stones, and David Bowie, and he's also a magician. Sitting next to Jules is Eugene Lee, who has just received an American Theater Wing Design Award for his work as production designer of Ragtime. He's also won Tony Awards for Candide and Sweeney Todd, as well as Outer Critics Circle and Drama Desk Awards for the 1995 revival of Showboat. His extensive work includes a lot of design in film, and for fun, he's the production designer for Saturday Night Live. On my far side over here, Mary Peterson is Julie Taymor's associate costume designer on The Lion King. She tells me she's been designing for about 15, 16 years professionally. She's worked a lot as an assistant and an associate costume designer on Broadway, for instance, for Amadeus, as well as The Lion King.
Arcadia.
Arcadia, excuse me, yes. Amadeus is a little too far back. Arcadia, I'm dating myself. And she's worked in regional theater, particularly around New Haven, where her husband was a student of Ming Cho Lee's, which brings me to Ming, who is sitting next to her. Ming has been on the faculty of the Yale Drama School for 28 years, 23 as co-chair of the design department, and he holds there the Donald Oehlenschläger Chair in the design department. In the mid-50s, Ming apprenticed to Joe Malsiner, and later he designed for Martha Graham's dance company, and he designed for 11 years as the principal designer for Joe Papp, both indoors at the Public Theater and outdoors in Central Park in the Delacorte Theater. For Papp, he did 22 Shakespeare plays, as well as work on new shows such as Hair and For Colored Girls. He has won a Tony and a Maharam Award. The Maharams were the predecessor award for the American Theater Wing Design Awards for K2. Ming is famous or infamous for having designed this enormous mountain for K2. Very impressive. He has just received a Special Achievement Award for outstanding service to theatrical design by providing assistance to young scenic costume and lighting designers with his annual Clam Bake, the Stage Design Portfolio Review, which is both a showcase and a colloquium where top designers and directors see the work of the next generation of young designers. He'll assemble around 50 of them from a dozen or so universities, and for 2 days they get intensive comment from important professionals. Donald Holder, sitting next to him, is a graduate of the Yale School of Drama, where he studied with Ming Cho Lee. This is the Ming side of the stage. And he has just won an American Theater Wing Award for designing the lighting for The Lion King. He sort of swept the awards this year. He won a Tony for that, he won a Drama Desk Award for that, and he won an Outer Critics Circle Award for that. He's worked with Julie Taymor on a number of other shows, including, for example, one Darien and The Green Bird. He's designed on Broadway shows like Huey and Eastern Standard and Solitary Confinement, and many plays off-Broadway, such as All My Sons, After Play, Spunk, Jeffrey, many shows you've seen. He's designed in many resident theaters around the country as well. And finally, sitting next to me is my co-chair, Beverly Emmons, who lights theater and opera in Europe and all around the United States. She's won a Tony, an Obie, 2 Bessies, and at least 3 American Theater Wing Design Awards that I can think of right now for Passion and The Heiress, and for Jekyll and Hyde and When the World Was Green last season. She's also an important dance designer. She's worked with legendary choreographers such as Martha Graham and Merce Cunningham, and also with legendary figures in the avant-garde theater world like Richard Foreman, Meredith Monk, and Robert Wilson. And in her spare time, she's artistic director of the Lincoln Center Institute. Welcome all. I'd like to begin by asking each of you what challenges your latest show presented and how you solved them. Jules? You and Peggy both.
Right. I'm speaking on behalf of my partner, Peggy Eisenhower, who couldn't be here today as well. Challenge. I guess the fact that there was such a large stage space, not a dramatic space, but a physical stage space that had to be changed over and over again to provide variety. It was a stage large enough to have 60 performers on at one time. So this large space needed to take on both dozens of different locales and as well as intimate, emotional places of a single performer. And the lighting, I guess the challenge was to make each one of those different and do it in a way that was visually rich and exciting for the audience. Also, I think another challenge was to find a style that could be both period, because the musical play begins in the beginning of the turn of the century, and at the same time find a way to make it contemporary. So those are 2 things I think of as a challenge.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, also on Ragtime.
The challenge? What was the question again?
What problems or challenges or whatever did you face on Ragtime, designing that entire production?
Boy, I don't know. I find it hard. I think the challenge was getting the job in the first place. You know, I had done a Showboat of, you know, the Herald directed, and I kind of really enjoyed that because I like boats. And then when I learned, when they were doing the second one, you know, I just thought they'd just give it to me, you know, but it didn't quite work out that way, you know. They you know, called me up to Canada, you know, and I met the director, and you know, had lunch, and then at the end of the meal they said, you know, could you like designers hate to hear this, you know. You want them to say, you know, yes, but they said, could you just draw something, you know, draw some little thing up, you know, and knock my socks off is what they actually said. So I don't know, I tried to do that, and they hired me. So that was the hardest challenge.
That's and then after that, designing a show with that many different scenes was nothing at all, a piece of cake.
I'm only finding my way in this kind of theater, you know. It's new to me.
Okay. Don, on the lighting for The Lion King?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, I would say a lot of what Jules mentioned about his production is interesting. I mean, I think I had the same kinds of concerns. Again, a very large-scale production with multiple locations. It seems like a lot of lighting challenges these days are related somewhat to that core issue, which is how to create an entire world on stage or evoke a world on stage with a very kind of open environment, or very where scenery is only suggested or is fairly minimal. The Lion King is a huge production, but it's essentially a box, a white luminous box in which the lighting needed to evoke the sunlight, the natural light of the Serengeti, and also create kind of a magical, mythical, fantastic place where this fable could where this sort of passage of the mantle from one generation to the next, and this incredible story could take place. And so the lighting, it was a challenge trying to fit all that in, trying to make it all work, and trying to stay within Julie's very, very specific vocabulary and vision for the piece. And it was a lot of fun, but a long, long, intensive process.
Ming, do I remember correctly that you have a show opening tomorrow in Arizona?
I guess.
Apart from what are you doing here?
well,
so we're glad to
no,
have you.
I usually, since I'm getting pretty old, they allow me to leave when after the first preview. Actually, it went well enough that I left before the first preview.
Goodness. What is the show?
Long Day's Journey. Long Day's Journey. I must say, I agree with Eugene. The hardest thing is to get a job, and he is succeeding, and I'm not. And but I think for me, what's even more important is to remain fresh, and to have a point of view, to be kind of truthful to oneself, and to actually enjoy the work, and to let the play kind of just carry you rather than try to impose something. And that's not easy. That's not easy. But it's good life. It's good life. It's very rich. Not monetarily, but very rich. So that's the challenge.
Mary, how about the challenges that you and Julie faced on the costumes for the Lion King?
Well, I think Julie and Michael also, I started with them early in the process, so I heard them talk a lot about this. And Julie was facing two very specific challenges. She had been hired by Disney. They had really taken a chance, stuck their neck out, someone who was very avant-garde, not at all what was expected of Disney, to reproduce on stage their baby, their most successful animated feature ever. And so she had to live up to the expectations of some very influential producers, Michael Eisner and Tom Schumacher and Peter Schneider. And she also, right from the beginning, was determined not to do what anyone expected. She was determined to maintain the actor within the animal character, and so to never lose the actor's face, the actor's personality underneath the puppet or below the mask or behind the mask. I think everyone, when they first heard that Disney was doing Lion King, expected fuzzy little animals on stage. And that was one of the first quotes that we all put up on our board as soon as it came out in the newspaper. There will be no actors in animal suits. Because she was very concerned about that this was an actor's show. This was about the people and not about merely the animals. It was about the story, and the animals were the characters in it.
And she said what attracted her was the humanity. I mean, the fact that at the core of the story, it's a very human story, a very human tale.
We have a guest. I'd like to welcome Meena T. Jahi. Would you like to just walk around a little bit before you sit down and just show everyone?
You have to work for it.
Show off the costume.
Yes, she's our Sarabi currently.
What is that from? What is the costume from?
This is the Lion King.
This is from the Lion King.
And what scene? What are you in that?
She plays the mother
Could I
of
see it
Simba.
again? Could you stand up again? What is it?
She plays the mother of Simba and the wife of Mufasa. She is the sort of the queen of the pride of lionesses.
The beading on the front of that is just beautiful.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Is
that very
can we get
heavy?
a close-up of any of this costume work from these cameras? Yeah. She should stand up. Yeah,
You have
stand
to
up.
It's not going to let you sit down and talk.
It's such beautiful work that, and you know, it's not somebody dabbing paint on something. It's really that's all real. That's all real work. Yes, you get it.
Is your headpiece very heavy?
No, it's not, and it attaches in the back, and there's a crank.
Could you sit down and we'll mic you so that everybody can hear this?
Her headpiece is molded out of carbon graphite. One of Michael's big concerns on this show was because they would have to be performing 8 times a week, and they would be in these costumes repeatedly throughout the evening, that anything that he was providing for them in terms of masks and puppets would be as light as he could make it to date, and he's constantly refining that. But it's a carbon graphite mold. Julie did the original carving, and then it was molded in carbon graphite, which Michael gets into the ounces all the time.
It's maybe like 7 or 8 ounces.
Yeah, it's less. It's certainly less than a pound until we start dragging her down with all of the silk.
It's this close. It makes you respond to them.
Perfect.
It really is so interesting that there's that much expression on the.
It's also, if you look at the research of African tribal culture in the Serengeti, a lot of the ritual garments and the ritual costume that they wore was, you know, it sort of evokes this, or this is kind of inspired by
Right,
that
this would have been
research.
carved wood,
Right.
and much heavier for the for the tribal performer. So we tried to give them a break.
Wonderful.
Have you experienced any kind of difficulties, any sort of technical challenges just wearing the headgear and dealing with the costume, or is it just easy?
Oh, no.
Not easy?
You could get caught in your silk and almost fall. That's happened to me a few times, but I've managed to learn how to walk with the silk and the way that the wind goes through the silk, and they also provide you with mirrors during the rehearsal process so you can see how you need to move and move your arms in order to keep the flow of the costume without tripping yourself up. And as well as there are tears that come out of the eyes, that they can get tangled once in a while, and you can be caught on stage with one tear in and one tear out. So that happens periodically.
You were also talking earlier about learning that your head gestures could be different than what you might normally make if you were unencumbered on stage.
For instance, if I just look a little to my right, it's so large with the headpiece on that I had to learn to make my movements very subtle, or else it could be just too much, really, from the audience.
How many dresses are needed backstage for that?
Oh gosh, Sheila, how many of you are there? There are about 21? Oh, 17 now. We started with a larger number in Minneapolis. Because it was a brand new show and we really had no idea how we were going to accomplish this. But we've narrowed it down, and I will brag a little bit, now that we have New York dressers, we were able to also make it a more efficient process. Thank you. Yes.
How many costumes are there for the 17 dressers to be putting on and off of people?
I think there are about 245 costumes, yeah.
How many do you wear?
Sheila? Oh gosh, I would say hyena, flower, six?
Yeah,
I think.
I would guess.
So the head stays and new pieces change? Or
no,
there
no.
are 6 different...
This is her only appearance as a lioness.
I see. This is when you appear as other characters.
Yeah.
The other costume.
She would appear, yes. Sarabi only, this is the image for Sarabi. This is, we have an unusual show in that our principals don't have all the costume changes. There's one look for Mufasa, there's one look for Simba, etc. It's the poor ensemble that suffer through rushing around backstage and, throwing off one thing and dragging on another and hoping they make it to stage in time. So.
Did the dressers have to learn special skills to help people with all of the hard puppet and stilts and elaborate? We should.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have. Cal Anderson is our wardrobe supervisor, and when he was interviewing crew, instead of the expectation that they would have a lot of stitching skills and the traditional skills needed backstage on a wardrobe crew, we were looking people who had their own toolkits and who could lift heavy things, so slightly different job description on this show. And high energy.
Yes.
And good disposition. I will say we have a wonderful, wonderful cast and crew, and just it's such an ensemble that the show really depends on that. And
you can feel it.
That's been important to everyone involved, I think. I expect for you too.
Absolutely. How do you get up to the top of Pride Rock in that outfit with that on your head?
Practice. The first time up, I think I left no blood in Mufasa's hand. But it's balance. You go up a few times, just regular clothes. Then you add the costume, and then you add the baby.
Right.
And it comes out of the basement. So the rock not only lifts, but it spins and rotates as you're walking up it. Oh. So, practice.
It's extraordinary. Really extraordinary. I'm going to go back to lighting, if I may, Tish. You said something about style in lighting. What does that mean, style in lighting? You had to find a style for Ragtime in all of this. What do you mean by style?
Lighting is often thought of as just illumination. Putting light on a stage so that you can see people, you can see the actors speak or see the scenery, but it's applied with more artistic levels than that. Lighting, theatrical lighting, is more artistic than engineering. It isn't providing only a certain amount of light so you can see someone. It's how do you see that person, so that you could say a style of lighting, the turn of the century, was probably very flat. Light came from the front, either from footlights or lights mounted on a balcony rail, a low position in the theater. So everyone was seen, but the lighting was flat. It had very little shadow. It had very little chiaroscuro. So a style would have been to add backlight so that people are now seen with greater dimension. I think the word style is probably the same in any art form, whether you think of style and what's the difference between one painter's style and another painter's style. I think that would apply to lighting designers.
To what extent are you using light to affect our mood and to affect us emotionally as opposed to illuminating?
It's a huge element in the theater. I think it's probably the biggest of all the functions of lighting, if they are to be able to see, so you have enough brightness so that you see people. Probably the most important function would be to evoke a mood, to create a feeling of something. It's not just to picture people in a certain setting, but it's to picture people as they would feel in that setting. there's a famous quote of Adolf Appia that it's not to light a person so you see that person standing in a forest, but to make the audience feel as if they were standing in the forest. What would that actor feel like if he were standing in the forest? So that I think the major element is to try to evoke a mood throughout the play. How do you change that? How do you make them, if the actor wants to portray something about sadness, how can you pick the right color that will say something about sadness? Or what is the angle of light that will make you feel more sad than another angle of light? So the tools of lighting, each one is analyzed or dissected to say, does this evoke the mood that the director and that the playwright want to express at that moment? It is really all about feelings. It's much less about intellect. So that when you leave the theater, you want to, as a lighting designer, you want to have contributed to the audience saying, I felt something. I was moved. I was emotionally involved because the lighting helped to do that.
You have something to say about that?
I agree. I think that by nature, the reason that lighting is such a powerful emotional tool, really, or a component of a theater experience is that we're all very sensitive to light in nature. I think that we respond to the way that we have a very kind of a subliminal emotional response to different light in the world. And I think that lighting designers often study the way light functions in the world and sort of store that in their visual vocabulary and pull it out at times to really apply it to a moment or a section of a piece, or somehow that the light in the world, it provides tremendous inspiration, at least for me, I know others, in the work that we do on stage, because we respond to light in the most basic kind of psychological way. And so what the lighting designer does is very powerful, and as Jules says, it's very emotionally based.
Well, and I think that, I don't know if John and Ming would agree with this, but I think as designers, as costume and set designers, we are totally dependent on our lighting designer to finish our work for us. And good lighting design can make a good costume or a good set better, and bad lighting design can absolutely destroy it. So, you know, the relationship is really important, and these are the people that really pull it all together for us. I was saying that I had seen something last night, and my first reaction was how disappointed I was in the lighting design, because I was looking at scenery that had real promise and costumes that I thought were lovely, and I thought the lighting design, I absolutely won't, but I thought it was a big miss. I thought that the lighting design had really changed so much about how I felt about what that production should have been.
I'll just say one other thing. One of Ming's colleagues, Jennifer Tipton, who teaches at Yale, my former teacher, had a very apropos statement. She said that 99% of the audience is unaware of the lighting, but 100% is affected by it. And I think that's very apropos. Sorry.
Oh, no. I think the lighting is actually the glue that eventually put everything together, including actors, so forth. Without lights, you won't see anything, and that, so there will be nothing. I just like to, being a teacher, so I can't stop talking. A lot of people feel that us designers are essentially problem solvers, and I think that is a little bit misleading. The challenge seems to be solving problems. I think we are actually problems creators to be solved. Because it's all about ideas. It's all about how you instinctively, impulsively relate, connect with the piece of work. And therefore, the directors, the actors, designers are really problem creators. If you don't create problems, there is no problem to be solved. And I think this is something that once you start thinking that way, you kind of free yourself from from solving problems. And to be a director, to be a dramaturge, how do you read a play? And there is this vision, there is this goal, there is this connection, and you have to somehow do a transformation from words into life, into imagery, into human events. And you have to get there, and that is creating problems. And I think that makes designing a much more exciting work and life, because we are the problem creators, and then we solve them.
And one of the things I remember from graduate school was there are no problems, just solutions. That was a big watchword of
What did you study in school when you decided to be a lighting designer?
Well,
were you an engineer first, or
I was
what
a forestry major.
We knew it was something.
I got a Bachelor of Science degree in forestry at the University of Maine. But of course, I was always interested in lighting, and it was. I mean, it's just as anybody does. I mean, we all have, especially when you're a teenager, you have a lot of interests, and forestry, being in the outdoors, was one, and theater and lighting actually was a very big interest of mine from an early age, because my parents took me to the theater starting when I was very young, and and I remember a lot of productions that I saw were kind of pivotal and kind of for some reason really affected me and really inspired me to kind of pursue the profession I eventually have been fortunate enough to be a part of. I mean, so it's something I've wanted for a long time. And eventually, the more I worked in the profession, the more I realized that I didn't know enough, that I was operating completely on instinct. And that's when
not a bad thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think what my training did, I mean, I thought that I needed to get some formal training, and I think what the core of my training at Yale was learning how to work, learning a process, applying a structure to the creative process, and figuring out how to really approach a play in a more kind of disciplined way, not in a scientific or engineering kind of point of view, but really sort of doing work that's coherent, that's cohesive, that's somehow unified and related completely to the text and the production. And so I was fortunate enough to go to graduate school, really because I recognized my own shortcomings, and that's pretty much my training.
I'd like to speak to the style issue in lighting a little bit, because at the very beginning of my career, there was a very specific problems, if you like, that were being posed by a group of creative people now, sort of we know as the avant-garde, whatever that means. But it meant something quite specific in terms of lighting. And Licos had been invented, a lot of exploration had been done through the 50s. In modern dance, Tom Skelton and Nick Cernovich were exploring very richly colored environments because the new equipment could take strong color. And there was, on Broadway also, there was a vocabulary that included a lot of color. And a lot of the people that I began working with, all of them separately, they each thought they'd invented it on their own. Meredith Monk, Robert Wilson, Joe Chaikin, all these people wanted white light. It was a whole thought of that light should be plain, not glamorous. Clear, white as in, is there gel in that light? Please take it out. White, clear. Very clear, simple. But of course, they also took and they wanted something that was sort of plain, not dramatic. But then the rigidity of that, of the idea of saying, well, then why not have just a fluorescent light? Why have Licos at all? Why have stage lights? Except if you go to light a play and you have only a fluorescent light on, that becomes extremely dramatic and powerful. That's not plain and unglamorous anymore. It goes, because we don't expect it on a stage, it becomes a stronger statement than one thought about when one said, well, let's just have a plain fluorescent light. And this is an example, I think, of of a sort of a break with the past definition of style that was articulated at that time. I think they explored it in their fullness, and we've let it go as not an interesting problem anymore. We've solved it many different ways, and we've taken what we've learned back in to serve the center, which very often happens in the avant-garde explorations. It waxes and wanes, and at the moment that's been understood and used. But it's an example of
Can I add a couple of thoughts about style related to that? As Ming would say, it comes from presenting a problem and then trying to solve it. I don't think you want to. I often argued at that in that era with those who would say, "Well, we're going to do it with just white light." There's nothing wrong with that at all if that's what the play demands. If this play should be done in white light, or if this play should be done with all light from the rear. But it's the play itself, I think, clearly you'd say, that should tell you whether it should be one style or another. And there's a whole idea of having style, just a comment about that in general, which is I'd like to think that I don't have a style, that I will pick or use the style that's necessary for that production, and not that I will always have this kind of light or that kind of light. And as far as, and I know Eugene will have some strong...
We don't agree.
We don't agree about this. But I think, in the case of color, there are shows, I've done some shows with absolutely no color whatsoever.
The big red light is very good, though.
The red...
See, the good thing about Jules, you know, is that you say, yeah, lighting is bunk these days. It's all too technological. But the great thing, you know, about Jules is you say, you know, we have this idea. Could we have this really like red light? You know, look, a little flash. You know, boom. You know, right? And then the next day comes this huge instrument. It costs $30,000. It's as big as a wall. You know what I mean? And when it flashes, you know, it's like the biggest flash you've ever seen. Has a cable going into it this big.
It was spectacular. I saw
It's very beautiful.
in Ragtime.
But we're talking again about mood.
What is this nonsense about? I don't understand this panel. I mean, I'm getting confused. You know what? I mean, you know, I'm just a funny guy from Rhode Island. You know, I mean, and I've worked for the same theater for 35 years. Probably a flaw. You know, a character flaw. And I think I did that because you know, I mean, I thought we had a style. You know what I mean? And you know.
Eugene, I stopped talking about style because I don't understand.
I'm confused. I don't think. See, I guess it's all this nonsense about what it looks like. Who cares what it looks like? I mean, I hate that. You know, it makes me crazy.
If you don't care what
it looks like. It's the process that's interesting. It's the process that's interesting. A resident company is interesting. Seeing the same actors, you know, year after year do different. This is interesting to me. I mean, you know. Occasionally, you have to wander into New York, but they don't take you serious.
You have a problem with imagistic theater like Robert Wilson.
I don't know him. I was working for Peter Brook in France, and a group of us, after having some pot or something, went over and saw Death Man's Glance. You know what I mean? And it was the greatest thing I ever saw. The French sat there very quietly looking at it, you know, but it was. Remember, that's the one with the nannies that danced out and had the big turtle with apple. It's great. It's fabulous. It's fabulous.
But may I interject?
Yes,
when you say it's the process, but is the process about something that you end up with that an audience then sees?
Yeah, they're not going to buy tickets to a process. They buy tickets to what you finished with.
The process is what you do before the audience walks in.
Now, you might make if you have a valuable process or an interesting or enlivened and encouraged and powerful process, you might come up with a better product than somebody else. That's where process is important, but that's not what the audiences are ultimately buying tickets to.
I think that we're faced with restrictions in what we do. We're faced with limitations, and I think that particularly lighting designers in terms of time, space, budget, I mean, we have to face those realities because of the way theater works in this country. We don't have a lot of time for a piece to evolve, which is
He was in the theater every day. He never left.
Except, well, Ragtime. But even Ragtime, even a production of that scale and scope, I mean, you have to make decisions early on. And my point is that I think that what lighting designers do is we have to come up with a visual vocabulary for a piece that's based on the vision of the overall production, what the play is, how the director sees the play, what the set design is. That there's a specific visual vocabulary which can be shaped and changed, and it can evolve somewhat. But
it can be romanticized and sweetened. It can be sharpened and hardened.
And it goes way beyond just front light and back light that provides basic illumination. But that's kind of how you develop a quote-unquote style for a
Since you
piece.
both represent two big shows that are here, how does it come about? What is the process? You're there to not only create a mood, but also to have us look at the costumes and the sets. Which comes to you first as the lighting designer? Do you
First,
get
they have to get hired.
when do you get?
We have to get
and when
hired.
are you
That's
asked
right.
to light these costumes or to light this set? What's the process there?
Well, I think that you have to, the first step is always connecting with the material, is becoming familiar with the piece and understanding the piece and understanding how the light will function on a certain level in this production. And then from there, you go through the process of developing your vocabulary, your ideas, and carving out the space in a way, and locating lighting within the frame of the production. And then things like costume palette and scenery palette and everything informs all of your choices, informs the kinds of color filters you'll use, the kinds of colors you use, the overall palette. But I think that, you know, our work is, as Jules said, is really aesthetically based as well. I mean, the first thing we do, just like every other artist involved with the production, is really communicate with the rest of the creative team and read the play and really understand the production. And then we can go on and do our work.
Well, and as an outsider to the lighting process, what I've observed both Jules and Don do, so much of their process is in the theater once all of us are done with our creative part of it. You know, we've designed the costumes, we've designed the scenery, now we're just fixing things and fine-tuning it and whatever. But the lighting designer, no matter how many plots they've drawn, no matter how many plans, no matter how many instruments they've ordered and how many gels they've chosen ahead of time, a lot of it doesn't really happen until they get into the theater and they're sitting there with the director at their side.
I always have an image of that scenery and costume designers get a chance to be by themselves, draw something and say, I don't like that. Okay, lighting designers do that in public, and that's the important thing. Lighting designers do that, I don't like that business, in front of everybody.
Yes.
And you have to get past that real quick to something that you do like, but you don't have the luxury of sleeping on it, coming back in the morning necessarily, which one does in the privacy of one's office.
Yeah. That makes for one of the difficulties in the theater for a lighting designer, is that we have to have the opportunity to fail. As you say, with a costume sketch, you can throw it away before you've shown it to the director.
Right.
For the most part, we put something up there on the stage, and we look at it, and we say we don't like it, but everyone is seeing it.
Right.
And immediately they come up to you and say, we don't like that, before we've had a chance to say we don't like it.
Usually the TD promises you time to try that out, but you never get it.
No, you never get
How
it.
expensive is that when you say no?
Well, it's expensive in just every minute in the theater, at least in the professional theater, the commercial theater.
It's expensive.
Is expensive because there are a lot of people on salary every hour, and you have a deadline. You want to get to a preview or a dress rehearsal or an opening night, and every hour is valuable because all departments want to use that time.
It's not the salaried people that are the problem, it's those hourly people.
Yes. Yeah.
But also, you know, we have to kind of figure out space. I mean, we have to be able to, prior to beginning the process in the theater, the lighting designer really, if the lighting designer hasn't really figured out where the positions are, how the light will work within the rest of the scenic environment, there's not a lot of leeway there once you get into a theater. I mean, you have to make a lot of decisions up front. So, I mean, you can reject a certain amount of your ideas once you begin the process of technical rehearsals, but a certain amount you're committed to.
Right.
And that's I think one of the most stressful part of the job is.
The process you're describing of the costume designer and the set designer doing their work and then the lighting designer coming in is not quite what I see in some elements of Ragtime, because many of the pieces of the set in Ragtime actually have lights on them. Presumably the two of you coordinated that, or did you go out and do your own lighting on the set, Eugene?
You mean the practical lights?
Yes, the lights on the boats at the beginning, where you see the lights in the sails when the sailboat is upstage, and throughout the show, there's a lot of that, more than in most shows.
First of all, Eugene is a lighting designer, by the way. You know,
Not by your terms.
Yes, sure you are. And
does that mean he put his own lights on?
He did. We got sketches from Eugene, and they would say a light here, and then I would find. In that case, I was serving Eugene just to provide the right size light bulb, or how to get it there, how to get the wire there, or I might suggest a place, but you suggested almost all of them. Now, I want to go back for a second to Eugene and let Eugene talk a little more about his bluffing about this process, because the result is a wonderful design. Yes, you go through a process, but the set for Ragtime has moments of brilliance, and it isn't about the audience doesn't see the process. The audience sees the result of the process.
The lights are bright.
Good to see you. You want to show the model?
No.
Well,
Yes,
talk about
it. Just got crazy
Come on.
brilliance. This is your cue.
This
Can
is
we
your
see
cue.
the model?
Do you have a model with you, Eugene?
Yes, I have a model.
I'm sure that Jules would be happy to help you. Bring it over here.
Okay, I'll help.
We wanna put it on
Let me
here.
go. I'm going to carry the whole thing for you.
Yeah, well, I hand it. Ain't too good. Let's see, let's see.
Oops, I can't walk.
Yeah. There we go. Now, this is just part of it.
Oops.
I'm nervous, Ming, because Ming doesn't generally like my things. Makes me really uneasy.
We'll get Ming's critique later.
It's in print. It's okay.
You didn't read it.
It's from my book. It's okay. What are we doing this for? This is
Tell us
guys.
what it is. Tell us what it is, Eugene. Tell us what it is.
Yes.
No. See. Actually, the thing that's interesting, you see in the Times. See, it's not about. I don't.
This is what is
this?
this set?
Oh, this is some silly thing. You know, this is like no. This in the Times the other day. You see, last Saturday's Times, someone wrote in. They said, why don't they just rebuild Penn Station? Because there was an article in the Times saying, Amtrak, now that they're putting in the fast-speed train, they're going to really fix up Penn Station a little bit because it's looking a little bad, you know, all this construction going on, and they're going to get rid of the handrails of the original station, you know, and I thought to myself, oh, great, you know, they never seem to get it, you know, and now we're going to get rid of the one little moment that's left of the old Penn Station as you go down to the tracks, you know, and under that floor is certainly the original floor, you know, so anyway, you know, but... I don't know. Ragtime was simple. I mean, Ragtime. The producer said, you know, I don't know.
Which set is it?
This is for Ragtime. It's a little piece of Penn Station. You know, tries to be a little. It fails,
right.
But it tries to. And it's not. But it tries to be a little piece. You know, and you know, yeah. Oh, there's a piece missing.
Yes.
Oh God. See, the only things that interest me, but see, it doesn't have anything to do with this nonsense. You know, I'll demonstrate. You know, see, it's like, and it's not my idea. It's probably probably no original ideas. You know, I mean, I was years ago. I don't know when, a long time ago. A director I still work for, one of those experimental guys with a white light, Andre Gregory. Right. We're doing a new play. He takes about 5 or 6 years to get his plays on. You know, it takes a lot. We're working on one now. But he had said, you know, go to the Berliner Ensemble. This was when the wall was up. You know, the wall was up. You know, and so I thought, great. So I went, you know, and it was pretty interesting. I'm just a boy from Wisconsin, you know, and I mean, you put your little passport in the slot, you know, and they took it away and all that at that time.
Was it scary?
Very scary. You never thought you'd get it back.
Yeah,
and you had to spend, and you had to, Ming, you had to spend so much money in East Germany. This is how the world has changed. Anyway, so one of the shows they do were on the repertoire. I mean, I'm a regional theater guy. I mean, New York, I feel uneasy just being here. Okay, so you know, they were doing Saint.
You're looking at me all the time.
No, they were doing St. Joan of the Stockyards. You may know that play.
Yes.
At the end of the play, there's a wonderful image that, you know, they push you up on the platform, and there's like capitalists, you know, like J.P. Morgan, and holding her up, you know. And there's a little, the platform is about, I don't know, 7 feet high, has a little higher than this valance, about this size though. And then at the very moment, at the end of the play, the little valance falls away, and all the proletariat is beneath holding it up. It's a wonderful little kind of simple.
You're telling us you stole that from the Berliner Ensemble?
No, I thought when we got to this, you know, there was this kind of moment, you know, where we had to have J.P. Morgan stroll on, and there was all this struggling about the East Side, you know, and so you know, we just had this little bridge, you know, just come down and you know, just crush people, you know? It was fun. You know, it was just kind of a wonderful image. The rest of it, who cares how it was done? I mean, see, it's kind of like, it's not so much what it looks like with me. That's why, I mean, I want to bring it out. I mean, this is, you know, this was actually 2 studies done for 2 different stairways for sightline problems or some boring problem. One is New York, and one was Chicago, or Los Angeles, I forget. But the thing is, like, in that show you didn't like, the showboat, yeah.
But I do like
the theme park.
Yeah,
the theme park.
So you did read it.
I read it.
Yeah, I wrote a letter of
Someone called me
apology.
up. Someone called me up. Okay, but that's okay. I like the theme park approach to it, but in that, you see, it had the way I think, at least. You see, it had a funny. There's one thing in this show too I like, little things, you know. It's like in there we had a little transition, you know, problem, and Harold was insisting I would have to solve it, of course, and so we had to get the little kitchen on. So we had the company come out, and they pulled up just a big muslin drop with cotton fields painted on it, you know, and then. You know, that hid the little scene change behind. Then blacks came on, they pulled it down and tossed it into a cart, and then they pulled the set down, and all the critics loved it. You know, it all meant so much, you know. But I love, you know, but it has nothing, it was wonderful, you know. I mean, I don't know, it really, see, it's, for me, I get confused by this. I didn't want to come on a panel like this. See, I'd actually heard, were you the one who said someone walked off the panel? Somebody said.
No.
What was the story?
No, we were talking about what would happen if somebody had to leave before we were done, and we thought maybe we'd just create a scene and somebody would walk out.
I'm not good at this.
I'm very glad you're here.
But I'm confused.
Yes. I think you protest too much.
Eugene,
but I'm delighted that you're here.
Me too.
Why does the clock have no hands in Penn Station?
More to the point is, why is the clock incorrectly done? Because we realized, you see, much more to the point, because, you know, the clock, you understand, you something, you know, 1, 2, Roman numerals, right? On a clock face, when you get to 4 lines, okay? It's not like 1V. On a clock face, they use 4 lines. So, did you know this? Look at the next, look
All
around
clocks.
at clocks. It's incredible.
4 dashes.
4 dashes for 4. Because the way it falls on the dial, you know, it's, you get confused, you know.
Yep.
I didn't know that. I guess we had all the research. Yeah, no, you know. You get it up in the air, you start getting the letters, you know what I mean? The clock had no face. I don't know, we don't want to have a, you know, who wants to look. I don't know.
Who noticed that? I want to know who noticed that. I think that's really interesting.
A wonderful man, a wonderful lawyer from Connecticut saw the picture of the set was in the New Yorker, and there was a picture of the set. Not a very good photo, but okay, but a very good photographer, a very nice man, but so that the clock was nicely seen. So the moment you know, the letters came.
And he was the one who.
So
knew
we
that
changed it. We set someone up, and they changed it.
Oh my goodness.
got some stage to climb out.
Mr. Lee, because the wing is interested in creating new people for the theater and all its aspects, that I'm so pleased at what you're doing. Would you elaborate a little bit on your clam bake, which is not a clam bake?
Well,
Has anyone come out of it? How many?
I feel I have said it all, but I like to say, you know, all of us like things and dislike things. The one thing that one learned to do is not to talk to a reporter when you have an opinion to express, and now it's in print, and then embarrass the hell out of me. But anyway, and so I quickly wrote a letter of apology to Eugene, but at that time you didn't read it. You wrote me back saying, what the hell are you talking about? But anyway, I also must say that it makes me very nervous with all this design talk.
Me too.
Very nervous.
We're doers, not talkers.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, not only that, when you reduce to design talk, it's all about how to. And what we are really interested in as design is what and why. And I think that is at the gist of what theater is all about. How to, you have to have it, you have to have the skill, then you do it. But what is difficult is the what and the why. Is it worth doing? What is it all about? We are all about context. Without context, what is theater? Theater is about life. It's about human events. And so, in some way, if you talk about design, theater, lighting, eventually you have to talk about theater. And why is it there? Is it worth doing? And therefore, is it worth designing for? I always feel that we are people who do an act of transformation. All we have is words. And with directors and actors, they transform words into real people, engage in the real human events, and experience to be shared with audience. And is it worth sharing? Is it dangerous? Does it offend people? If a theater doesn't offend people, that's a political statement, and I think it's pretty tepid theater. And probably it's not worth doing. And so there's so much to talk about, and the how-to you can learn anytime. You can learn it at age 68, and perhaps at age 78 you may do something that how-to will, and you will continue to learn. But the what and the why is something that needs to be nurtured, to make people aware of. And that means that you, and I love mixing around with people who are younger than I am, and to know what's in their mind, what bothers them, to encourage them to have something to say. And this is the country, and if we don't do something about it, this is a country, still, it allows you to say anything. You go to China and you are in trouble. You say anything and you will have Tiananmen Square and 4,000 people later, and they still don't care about human rights. So in some way, coming back to the clam bake, what I feel important is to gather people together and talk about the what and the why. And then, is there the skill or something that gets in the way of able to articulate the what and the why? And that is what the clam bake is all about. And I feel that very selfishly, I found that if I'm strictly teaching at Yale and all I see are the Yale students' work, then I'm isolated. And this is a big country. And I just simply would not allow myself to be isolated. So, selfishly, I would like to see people from other schools And I have to tell you, I steal a lot of ideas from them.
But then you're saying for the what and the why, are you getting back to the word, that's the important thing?
Well, I guess, words, music, and the what. What is the action? What is the human events? And I, in the old days, I now remember that I actually was the first Macaron Award receiver, and big deal. If I designed the way I did in '64, I should be shot because, but the thing is, now, and in the old days, I keep talking about sculptural material, blah, 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 blah. And now, what I enjoy is when suddenly I'm stuck and I'll read the play again.
The American Theater Wing seminars have focused on the performer, and it's on the playwright and the director and the choreographer and the producer and how you produce a show. And today's seminar on the design has been one of the most interesting and fascinating ones and thinking ones that we've had. And without the people that are on the panel today, there really would be no theater, despite what you're saying about how important the play is. It is only as important as you make it come to life for the audience, because without it, it's that flat lighting that you've talked about. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to you for coming to the Wing seminar and sharing this knowledge with you. You know that the American Theater Wing is more than a sponsor of seminars and more than our famous Tony Awards, which is created for excellence in the theater. We are an organization whose year-round programs are dedicated to serving the theater and the community with the goal of developing new audiences and new people coming into the theater. And to achieve that goal, we have created development programs for students like Introduction to Broadway, which began 7 years ago and has enabled more than 70,000 New York City high school students to attend a Broadway show, for many of them for the very first time. And through our newest program, Theater in Schools, theater professionals, like the people that you've seen on these panels, go directly into classrooms to work with and talk to students about working in the theater. In addition, we have our hospital program, which dates back to World War II and our legendary stage door canteen. And today's version of the program uses talent from Broadway, off-Broadway, and the cabaret world to entertain patients in nursing homes, veterans hospitals, children's wards, and AIDS centers in the New York area to bring the magic of theater to those who cannot get to the theater itself. We are proud of the work we do and happy for a wonderful working relationship with the theatrical community. We are grateful to everyone who makes what the Theater Wing does possible. And now, I'd like to thank you once more on behalf of the American Theater Wing. I'm Isabel Stevenson. I'm chairman of the board of the American Theater Wing, and these seminars are coming to you from the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. Thank you very, very much for being here.